Let's see who's coming. It all. It all. It all. All right, here we are. All right, folks, here we are in our 10th Ibn Arabi session. We're going to finish Qaysari, but I will read basically the prologue to the fusus itself. First, let me just get it here. And then we will discuss both this last chapter of Qaysari as well as the preface itself, because I have some ideas about this preface that I actually did mention in the last time we did this course. So without further ado, let me just read this short preface of the Bezels of Wisdom. In the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful, praise be unto God who has sent down the revelations of wisdom upon the hearts of the logoi, or the words, kalimat, in a unique and direct way from the stations of eternity, even though, or actually the stations of primordiality, even though the sects and communities may vary because of the variety of the nations. May God bless and protect him who provides the aspirations from the treasuries of bounty and munificence, Muhammad and his family. I saw the apostle of God in a visitation granted to me during the latter part of the month of Muharram in the year 627 in the city of Damascus. He had in his hand a book, and he said to me, "This is the book of the Bezels of Wisdom. Take it and bring it to men that they may benefit from it." I said, "All obedience is due to God and his apostle. It shall be as we are commanded." I therefore carried out the wish, made pure my intention, and devoted my purpose to the publishing of this book, even as the apostle had laid down, without any addition or subtraction. I asked of God that both in this matter and in all conditions he might number me amongst those of his servants over whom Satan has no authority, also that in all my hand and may write, in all my tongue may utter, and all my heart may conceal, he might favor me with his dispositions and spiritual inspiration for my mind and his protective support, that I may be a transmitter, not a composer, so that those of the folk who read it may be sure that it comes from the station of sanctification, that it is utterly free from all the purposes of the lower soul, which are ever prone to deceive. I hope that the reality, having heard my supplication, will heed my call, for I have not set forth here anything except what was said before me, nor have I written in this book aught but what was revealed to me. Nor yet am I a prophet or an apostle, but merely an heir preparing for the hereafter. It is from God. So hear, and to God do you return. When you hear what I bring, learn. Then with understanding see the details in the whole, and also see them as part of the whole. Then give it to those who seek it, and sit not. This is the mercy that encompasses you, so extend it. From God, I hope to be of those who are aided and accept aid, of those bound by the pure law of Muhammad, who accept to be bound and by it bind. May he gather us with him as he has made us to be of his community. And this was the prologue or preface to the Bezels of Wisdom. Now, whereas Ibn Arabi in writing goes way out of his way to dissimulate, this prologue itself both communicates a sort of prophetic reception. The book is given to him by Muhammad in a dream, but it is also communicating that this book, the Bezels of Wisdom, is something on par with Scripture, even if he is outright not asserting it as Scripture, but more as something animating the meaning of Scripture. So there's taqiyya going on, obviously, and also a very profound assertion of authority. So I just, in the very first session that we did last year that didn't get recorded, I mentioned that I believe that this is a sort of prophetic reception that even in his denial, that this assertion is being pretty unequivocally made, that this book occupies a station that is on the level of scripture itself. But given the cultural context, given the danger that this would represent if one were to overtly communicate such a thing, and given the fact that Ibn Arabi had already had fatwas passed against him, and there were people at one point trying to kill him for his views, he communicated it the way he did. Nevertheless, the Bezels of Wisdom, in my opinion, is something that is both Quranic and extra Quranic simultaneously. So this is a tension that we are seeing in two of the major figures that we're studying, whether it's Sohrawardi or Ibn Arabi himself, to frame the matter in the kind of domesticated way that the academy or even the traditional religious seminaries in the Islamic world have framed it, I think misses the point. And a lot of it is in itself, it is a consensus rather than the truth of the matter, is that the issue of walaya in Sufism and just generally in the esoteric milieu of Islam is not a cut and dry issue as most people think it is. Within this particular milieu, whether that of Tasawwuf or whether esoteric Shiism, the limitation that an exoteric doctrine of the finality of Muhammad's revelation represents was acutely felt and understood pretty much from the very beginning. This finality doctrine, as we're now beginning to understand from very careful philological and historical studies, was not something that was taken in the meaning that we have understood it today. But as of the Abbasid period, which is beginning to become very evident, a very specific meaning was attached to the doctrine of Khatamiyya. And it has persisted ever since. And this persistence has generated a tension within the Islamic world that continues to this very day, where assorted figures clearly inspired, give examples of Ibn Arabi or Sohrawardi, many others, Al-Laj, Ainul Ghazat Hamadani, and many others besides them, offered wisdom, teachings, that in many senses go beyond the wisdom that the Quran, at least on the surface, gives to us. And there's many different ways that one can look at it phenomenologically, in the way that Henry Corbin would phrase things. The Quran is not just merely the words between the two covers of the book. It is reality itself. So that then the Quran can encompass not just the words that are articulated in the various chapters of it in the surahs, but also the wisdom and the revelations of the various sages that have come under its umbrella. This idea obviously is also controversial in its own right because it asserts that there's a continuing revelation of Islam. I don't have any problems with that at all. I think that is the truth of the matter. But when we're dealing with the exoteric mindset in the exoteric world, this is what we're faced with, where you have very violent reactions to even the remotest suggestion of something to this effect. So that's my 2 cents on the preamble of the fusus. We can now discuss that, and as well as this final 12th chapter of Qaysari, where he kind of touches on some of this stuff. So we can discuss them both together. The floor is yours. Whoever wants to go first, jump in.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Alaikum salam. Can you turn up your mic, please?
Yeah. Hold on one second. Is this better?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Excellent. So on page 229, I wanted to delve into the fana or annihilation a little bit more. He said something that is interesting. Let me see which paragraph it is. It's, I believe, the second paragraph on the English translation of page 229. So for him, annihilation here does not mean the total non-existence of the servant. Rather, it is the annihilation of the human aspect and the divine aspect. So I wanted to see about fleshing that out a bit more. Is this sort of a replacement of the limited human attributes with the fully unqualified divine attributes where the person becomes a prism through which the divine shines more clearly and powerfully. Would that be a good way to summarize what's going on there?
That's one way to put it. Absolutely. Um, it is in a sense also a kind of re-amendment of the classical Persian Sufi concept of annihilation from an Akbarian lens. Just remember that Ibn Arabi and his school don't believe a one-time only fana experience, right?
Right.
So there are infinite fanas. And on top of that, Ibn Arabi and his school believe that, nobody is annihilated in the totality of God. That's impossible. But you are annihilated in that particular name and attribute, that divine face that is turned to you specifically, that you are the manifestation of. So when you're annihilating, and the author actually uses this word later in that same page, he talks about individuating, right? So annihilation and subsistence from the point of view of the school of Ibn Arabi is a true spiritual individuation. It's when you literally come back to your fitra, to that primordial imprint that you came into the world with.
Right. I always understood fana and baqa as being two facets of the same experiential phenomenon. You can't really understand or have one without the other. Would that be an accurate understanding here too?
Perfect, perfectly accurate. Yeah.
And so ultimately too, even though we do see the um the collapse of any kind of dualistic theology here, we still have mysteriously maintained the ineffable transcendence of Allah. When you're annihilated within that name which has turned to you, you are still not, quote unquote, merging with the totality of the Godhead, so to speak.
Yeah, which is impossible, from the
Right.
point of view of the school. And so, but then that kind of allows the possibility of infinite annihilations and subsistences, or infinite possibilities of divine individuation in a single person.
Right.
Yeah.
And none of these fana experiences, no two is alike. They're all just so absolutely unique.
Yes.
You could even call them fractal instantiations of Tawheed.
Yes. Perfect. Yes. Fractal
Uh,
instantiations of Tawheed. Yeah.
okay, that's awesome. I've always wanted to flesh this out because, in so much of the Islamic theological discourse, they're very concerned with preserving that distinction of the Khaliq and the Makhluk. But here we're seeing something else going on. That whole distinction is being transcended.
Yeah.
You're not collapsing everything into Allah, but you're transcending that distinction. But there's so many ways that people have tried to describe the theosis, if you will, of a human being in various religious contexts. And some of this language sometimes reminds me of like some of the Nestorian Christian language and things like that,
Yeah.
where
That's a good comparison. That's a pretty good comparison. Yeah.
yeah, it reminds me of, this whole idea that you have a very human Jesus, and it's not quite adoptionist necessarily, but his attributes do he becomes more transparent to the divine, I guess, if you will. So it does
Yeah.
seem like there's a genealogy of these ideas, and they are related.
And this transparency to the divine is something that is already that you're already born with it. Okay.
Right,
But what
right,
life does, what the course of a human life does, is that it veils you from this, right? Or to put it in this illuminationist language, you're thrown into a well, a dark well, which is the world, the dunya,
right,
right? But this dark well is just a hole in the ground of the dunya, that above which is transparent to the divine already, which is your self.
right.
So you're not acquiring anything. You're just basically returning to something that you have already always been.
Right. So we're not even at that level of that old Christian quote unquote heresy of a creature is adopted into divinity.
Mm.
Your starting point is the divinity,
Yes,
always.
always. This is also the core theological difference between Islamic and Judeo-Christian notions of, the human born with an original sin. Obviously, Islam doesn't believe in this,
Right.
Believes in the reverse of this. You're born actually pure. The impurity is an accretion that occurs during the course of time within a given life, human life.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's really what I wanted to go over. I'll let somebody else go, but
Well, I mean, just before
that's
you go, I mean, just think about it from a theological point of view. Um, the Islamic point of view makes Toba, makes repentance a real possibility at any time, and also offers that opportunity for the person to understand that sin is not something that is intrinsic to the soul. Whereas with Judaism, or especially Christianity, sin is something you're born with.
yeah.
You're carrying the burden of what happened in the garden.
Yeah, in which case that there's really no way around that collective ontological guilt, if you will. I know some Christian traditions nuance this a little bit differently than others, but we'll go with Augustine here.
Oh
It,
God.
it's pretty much you're wearing a millstone around your neck.
Yeah. Born with it. Yeah.
Right.
So then it's not much of a leap if you think about it from what standard Islamic theology says about the fitra and what Ibn Arabi and his school are saying about fana and baqa.
I see. Okay.
Um,
Excellent.
I'm not sure how important that distinction is when you think about it, because even in Islam, souls are fallen, right? And the whole point is to become
Uh
close.
no, actually that word is very seldom. We don't say fallen, right? We don't use the word like, for example, or any um, root of the word hobut, to fall. Um,
No,
we say instead that during the course of a life, there's that famous hadith, a child is born pure, right? Or even a child is born Muslim in the kind of ontological, existential sense. It is the parents that turn him into a Christian, a Jew, or pagan, or this, that, or the other, which then
mhm.
puts the responsibility on the um, the origination of sin on a socialization towards it,
Mhm.
right? Then offering the door of return back to the period before that even happened. So the soul is not fallen in Islamic, even in Islam, standard Islamic theology. In that sense, I mean,
No,
still Hawaii uses that language of falling and fallen, but the assumption with him is that this is as a consequence of the same process that the Quran is describing. That the soul has kind of moved so far away from its primordial nature that it is fallen in that sense.
that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah.
So maybe not technically, and like I mean, I know exactly what you mean, but at the same point, like for all intents and purposes, the soul still has to, attempt to become closer to God throughout its lifetime, and
Yeah,
through various means of worship or purification or whatever the
sure.
practices or techniques, and
Yeah.
become more and more, return, you know, progress further and further along the return home, as it were,
Yeah.
because we're not home.
Yeah.
I mean, what I mean. So that's what I mean by fallen. But sorry to nitpick here, but I'm not like, for me, like the distinction is kind of almost moot, because either way, we're not where we need to be you know, according to the prophets and the messengers.
Mm,
Um, and which is why so many practices are prescribed for us,
mm.
and which is the point of the wayfaring, is to progress along a spiritual path as though we're not there. So I'm not sure what happens. So I get what you're saying, though. We're not born like tainted or impure,
There's
but
no
like you say,
stigma. There's no stigma to the human soul that first comes into the world. In fact, the opposite, right? Well, as we'll read and as we read before, I mean, Ibn Arabi very outright says, that the younger a human, the closer they are to God.
right,
In the
right.
story of Moses, when he's talking about the baby Moses, that's what he says. Right? Whereas in Judeo-Christian standard theology, we're not talking about the esoteric schools, but in standard, what Nate just instanced in form of Augustine, that child, that baby is born with sin. That
Right,
stigma
right,
is already around its neck at the moment of his birth.
right. And that belief in and of itself is, one of the veils, one of the problems, a kind of a stain on the soul, as long as that's what a person believes,
Mm,
especially if it's beat over their head from an early age.
yeah.
Mm.
You're born with
So
sin, and your only way out is to basically make an intellectual and hopefully a super rational assent to Jesus Christ, as far as
right.
Christians are concerned.
You have to go to church every Sunday and perform all their rituals and give them lots of money.
Yeah,
And maybe then you'll be okay.
you'll be okay in the afterlife. You've secured yourself um, a haven from the torments of hell. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to make a joke of it. It's kind of serious business, obviously, but yeah. And sorry, I don't mean to nitpick, but it's interesting. I love that distinction, though, and yeah, it does remove a lot of the inbred guilt that you get from the other religions, especially Christianity. Anyway, sorry to interrupt there.
No, no worries. But I mean, this is where I think Nietzsche's criticism, at least when he's targeting Christianity, is quite valid. Because what that breeds is, in fact, the slave mentality and slave morality that he had a huge problem with. I mean, there's a lot I disagree with Nietzsche about, lots. But I think on that particular point, he was right. And what it generates in this human subject is a form of split. I mean, even to the point of a kind of a schizophrenia.
Yeah, right. Although on the exoteric level, again, to nitpick just one more time, even on the exoteric level, I mean, even in Islam, if you're not one of the believers, and especially not one of the pious believers, then you're in real trouble, as far as guilt is concerned and browbeating from your
Sure.
neighbors and your
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but anyway,
But this is what exotericism does. I mean, it
yeah,
generates by nature this us and them. It propagates itself by that very us, them, safe, them, these two categories. Which is
right,
what
right.
this school breaks down and breaks down completely on the basis of the Quran itself. Very novel reinterpretations of these Quranic verses. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. And I almost can't believe that Ibn Arabi got away with it and, didn't suffer the same end that,
Well, who was going to refute him? I mean, this is the thing. Ibn Arabi is not someone that you can sit down and refute. Ibn Taymiyyah and some of the other subsequent purists attempted it, but it is so embarrassing, their attempt, because to want to even attempt to refute Ibn Arabi, you have to approach him by his terms. You can't use like standard scholastic logic or Aristotelian logic to try, because first of all, Ibn Arabi is deliberately breaking these laws, and he's telling you that he's breaking these laws,
mm,
right? And that his logic, his reasoning is occurring on another level. It's a non-dual dialectic, right? So you have to be able to argue with him on that level. And if you try to argue with him on that level, there's no way that you won't be converted to his point of view.
right, right, exactly. Because he has the superior point of view.
Because he has a superior point of view. Exactly. Yeah.
And I agree with you, by the way. I think it's pretty much implicit in everything we've read so far that he essentially is making a claim to prophethood. I would say to all of them, especially like going to that last chapter, prophethood, messengerhood. I mean, if you want to call his books, you know, books of the law and sainthood.
I mean, once we get to that second chapter of Seth, when he says that he is the golden brick, I mean, that basically nullifies his dissimulation in the prologue.
Right.
You know, that well, because basically he's saying that first of all, the message of Muhammad was incomplete, and that Ibn Arabi has completed it now, right? So all his tahiyya in the prologue is just that.
Hmm. And like you said, it's Quranic and extra Quranic at the same time. I think the fact that it's Quranic keeps him kind of in a safe ground. Like, I mean, he's the tradition is there behind him, and the Quran is there underneath him, supporting him. So,
It's a beautiful strategy because you think about it. What just if you look at what Ibn Arabi does, just as a linguistic strategy, trying to argue with him on his terms, he has laid traps everywhere in his texts. If these exoteric theologians try to use the Quran or Hadith against it, using his text to do so, I mean, even Taymiyyah attempted it. Reasonably speaking, they have walked into a trap, and it's very easy to then turn the tables against these detractors immediately, right? As you know, some of the respondent to Ibn Arabi's critics have done repeatedly when Ibn Arabi has been attacked that way.
yeah. By the way, just a quick question here. I have Dagley's translation of the fusus. That's not the same translation you
We're
were just reading
doing,
from, is it?
you should have the translation of Mr. Ralph Austin. I think this is a better, I like Dagley's translation. I think it's slightly verbose, but the Austin translation is generally speaking better. You should have that.
Okay, I'll have a look. I just saw the Dagley one and grabbed that. Let
If
me
you
make a
want to
note of that.
continue,
Austin.
if you want to continue reading that, that's okay. You know, it also has valuable notes in it, but I think Austin, generally speaking, is better.
Okay, I'll switch over. Okay, thank you.
No worries.
May I ask a follow-up question?
No worries, of course. Go for it.
So when he's talking about, I mean, I know he's dissimulating a bit. There is definitely some kind of prophetic claim going on. And when Qaysari is talking about sainthood or wilaya as the inner reality of nubuwah, of prophethood, um, how are we to, especially those of us on the Shi'i side, how are we to square this claim with
Oh
the
boy.
claims made for Ahlul Bayt?
Oh, for that, you got to go to Sayyid Haydar al-Muli because he spilled a lot of ink on this question.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, spent a lot of ink. Corban translates some of this stuff between On Islam Iranian, especially the fourth volume, and also the two essays in Temple and Contemplation, where this comes up, and especially the single essay where he's talking about Haydar al-Muli. Haydar al-Muli was of the opinion that Ibn Arabi was dissimulating on multiple vectors, that this seal of universal sainthood that he's talking about is actually the hidden mom, and that we can even grant Ibn Arabi some station as the seal of specific sainthood, but the seal of universal sainthood belongs to the hidden imam, to the hidden imam Mahdi. And al-Muli would then impute this as this is what Ibn Arabi really meant when he was talking about these two stations. But if you read Ibn Arabi himself, at least to me, it's very obvious that he is claiming the universal station for himself.
Right. So Amoli sounds like he does an impressive polemical job, but you're not quite convinced yourself.
I find this. I mean, I really, really love Sayyid Haydar al-Muli a lot, but I think in his own case, it's pretty obvious that he's trying to shoehorn Ibn Arabi into a kind of a respectable figure for the Shia.
Right.
Yeah.
And hey, to give credit where credit is due, maybe that was necessary because I've encountered a
Yes.
lot of Shia who polemicize unfairly against Ibn Arabi.
I know. For me, it doesn't really even matter. The insights and the depth of the insights speak for itself. It doesn't matter. People this is a mentality we have amongst a lot of exoteric Muslims and other creeds also. Something is true given who said it and what rank they have and what kind of credibility they have. They don't look at what is being said. And this is contrary to one of the central aphorisms of Ali in both the Nahjul Balagha and the Quran al-Fara'id. And that is, don't look at who is saying what. Look at the truth is in what is said, not who is saying it. Right?
Yeah.
So this is a principle within Shiism itself that almost nobody practices amongst the Shiites.
Yeah, I hear you there. That's for sure. Okay, I lied. Maybe one other follow-up question, and then I swear I'll let somebody else go.
No, but you can have as many as you want. Go for it.
Just to piggyback on Jeff's question a little bit too. So we've established that we in Islam do not have a concept of this kind of ontological fall and this stain of sin that we're guilty of. So we have this paradigm, though, of heedlessness and remembrance, ghafla and dhikr.
Yeah.
Whence comes the heedlessness? Like, what is the nature of this heedlessness? Obviously, it's not corrupting that original purity, but it is taking us away from the truth somewhat.
Yes, of course. Well, it's a station of being veiled. It's that mahjubiyah, right? Which is the process of socialization that the nafs or the concupiscent soul, is constantly inclined to, and what the suluk is trying to dehabituate that soul from doing.
Right. So essentially, it's a consequence of things that are possible because of the creation, the nature of this creation, which is simultaneously full of tajalliyat, these divine disclosures, but at the same time, with revelation, there's always a veiling as well.
Yes. With everything, there's a veiling and a revelation simultaneously. Everything. With Ibn Arabi, he says this several times, that everything has the possibility to veil and unveil.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot more sense then too. And that's it for me. The floor is open.
He's very, very insistent that, a wayfarer should not be dismissive of things. Even if you're going to dismiss it, you should dismiss it from a point of view of knowledge about that thing rather than ignorance about that thing. Because then your knowledge of that thing is the difference between you being experiencing unveiling or remaining veiled.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned that in yesterday's Sohrawardi class, where he is very intentional about learning an argument before he disagrees or refutes it.
Yeah. Which, alas, man, many people, as we know, do not engage in. They will jump in half cock without even understanding what the argument is and dismiss it just because they don't like it.
Yeah, it's
knowing
the
anything
truth.
about it. Yeah.
Okay, hello. I'd like to ask a question. Sorry. Okay, so on page 231, he says, so he's talking about the circle of sainthood. He says, the circle of this station is more complete and greater than the circle of prophethood. For this reason, prophethood is sealed and sainthood is enduring, since al-Wali is one of the names of God, unlike Nabi. Since sainthood possesses greater scope than prophethood, and its inner aspect encompasses both prophets and saints. Then he goes on to say that the prophets are saints annihilated in God who subsist, and sorry for reading all this, it's got a broader point. Anyway, there are saints annihilated in God, subsisting through him, who inform about the unseen and its secrets of what is necessitated by the name time, al-Dahr, relating and appearing in every period and epoch. This station is also by a divine designation and not acquired. In fact, all stations are divinely designated, arising from the permanent archetype of the holy emanation. So we sort of get this idea of this station sort of coming from the permanent archetype. And he also talks about earlier about how prophethood is an appointment, a divine designation received by his permanent archetype from the theophany that the holiest effusion confers to the archetypes in the divine knowledge. So I'm wondering, is there a difference between this divine effusion that's happening? Or?
No, and there's nothing. And there's also something he's saying here. If every station is designated, right, and God can do whatever it wants to do, then God can create any prophet, a new prophet at any time, right? Which is one of the accusations according to the testimony we have that came up in the trial of Sohrari when he was questioned by these fuqaha in Aleppo over this, and when he said, God can do anything, they accused him of heresy. But this is what, pretty explicitly what Qaysari himself is suggesting in this paragraph.
Right, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So earlier you're talking about like this process of purification. Sorry, it's kind of jumping to a different topic.
No worries.
I was wondering whether this like point of reaching purity through our efforts can be almost more important than, merely reaching this purification. Because you have some of these stories of the prophets, how they have controversial points in their lives, like Musa punching that dude.
Killing that dude. Killing the.
He killed that. Yeah, but like obviously that's sort of his way of sort of coming back from that is different from like what we do when we try to correct our wrongs. So yeah.
So what's the question? Yeah.
Yeah, just that idea of like this effort that we have in our life of going from ghafla to to that state of unveiling. Like it seems to be like a very it's like a very like it's a continuing process.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Until you reach that station where like you don't have to do it anymore. But like I was wondering, like in terms of what we're doing with our soul, in terms of resonating with that higher frequency, like is the fact that we're putting all this effort into it, like almost
Actually,
what makes it worth it itself?
What needs to be understood, and almost all the masters have said this in various form, the tripwire of ghifla, of neglect, is always present in the life of the world, in the life of the dunya, right? So this is why vigilance is one of the most important attributes that any wayfarer or even master can acquire, right? There's no point at which, even when you have these opening experiences, these futuhat, and you have these fana and baga experiences, there's no point where you can drop your vigilance. You must always be vigilant from falling into neglect, because even the most unveiled master is capable of falling into a veil.
Yeah, because the station itself can almost become a veil, right?
Yes.
Once you get too preoccupied with it.
Precisely, because there's also infinite stations beyond whatever station that has been attained.
Right. Another thing I was wondering is so there's this dude Shabrawi, this guy, he wrote this book about the degrees of the soul, and one thing he says is that like it's similar to what Ibn Arabi writes, or like basically the same thing about how that degree of subsistence happens after fana. And I was wondering how if there's like infinite degrees of fana, is there fana that occurs after subsistence as well?
Yes, fana al-fana, we have all kinds of manuals that talk about what happens after the initial fana and baga experiences. Yes.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Hussein.
Yeah, my question is from the very first page of the chapter, so 225, and this is trying to think of how to approach this. Well, I've been anticipating this from the beginning because the editor mentioned it. It's just really interesting that there's the Muhammadan reality is supposed to be that which harmonizes all of the external beings, because as they come into external existence, the names start to conflict with each other, and so there's a need for something to mediate between them. And it's really, the language is really interesting. It's mediate between them and preserve their order in this world and the hereafter. And also the concept of perfection comes up here, bringing everything to its perfection outwardly and inwardly. And so when I first read it, I was thinking, you know, each of us could have our own perfection, but in order for all of us to come into some kind of organization or some kind of ordered whole, there needs to be this Muhammadan reality that either unmanifested or manifested, that needs to bring all of these different beings into a kind of harmony. And that suggests to me like social and political, the establishing of social and political norms. And so I guess one of the questions that came up for me was, you know, perhaps individually, none of us can really establish those kinds of norms.
Without divine mandate, no.
Yeah. Well,
Because, yeah, go ahead.
without the divine mandate, or which would come from that being which manifests the all-comprehensive name.
Yeah.
But the more I was thinking about it and I was kind of unpacking it, it also occurred to me that there might be another possibility, which is that instead of thinking of, you know, my perfection or my Lord as being one thing and the Muhammadan reality as being another, that the relationship between them might be more of a kind of unity, such that that Muhammadan reality is in a way immanent in each of the individual lords or perfect natures, right? And so it's there's like two different ways of thinking of it. One is like, oh, I need to go find the prophet wherever the prophet is, whether it's the unmanifest or it's the manifest, because until I find that being, I don't know I don't know how to or how society should be organized, or the world should be organized. I can only speak for myself, but the other way of looking at it might be that by attaining one's own perfection, one is also coming into proximity with that Muhammadan reality. And so
Yes.
there is a kind of intimation about how things should be
Mhm.
through oneself.
Yeah. Yes. Perfectly put. There's that dialectical tension. Yeah. Yeah. And you can, on the one hand, that say that in the face of the doctrine of finality, right, what this forced the Sufis to do, and mystics in general in Islamic world, who didn't even bear the Sufi label, was to discover this very thing by finding that haq, Muhammadan haqiqa, you know, within themselves. You end up at doing precisely that very thing, to attempt, once you come back, to, if you can't actually create a polity, but at least attempt to reform a polity that may have gone off the rails. But if you look back into the past and you look at Muhammad's own wayfaring, Muhammad himself was looking for the prophet of his soul and came out of the other end as the prophet himself in this process. You know, his nocturnal vigils, his fasting and sitting in caves and all of this stuff. He was himself following a prophetic sunnah of his predecessors. Okay, so this is where this gets extremely interesting, is that, you know, the doctrine of finality, in a sense, created for the Sufis and the mystics of Islam the very same fertile dynamic that the Prophet of Islam himself found in Mecca that initiated his career. Okay. And this is something that needs to be looked at, because then the same source of circumstances for a given mystic or a Sufi who comes up at the other end of this process, in some ways, obviously with the modifications of history and circumstance and geography and all the rest, are the same circumstances that the Prophet himself would be faced with. So then it is incumbent sometimes, not always, but most times, for a given mystic who comes out of the other end to then do the dawah, not as an ideological calling, but as a dawah for balance, justice, all of these sorts of things. And so that puts that mystic, whoever they may be, in the same position as the Prophet. This is what the school of Ibn Arabi, at least with Ibn Arabi himself, articulates beautifully, because if the mystic gets kind of trapped in that way station of, well, the world is the way it is, it will never change, so I'm just going to sit here and navel gaze for the rest of my life until I blow out into pure being. No, is the answer of Ibn Arabi in the school. You're not perfected yet, because once you come out of the other end, you have to engage, because you're the hands and limbs of God at that point. So if you see an imbalance, even if it's a little one, you address it. If you have the possibility of addressing the greater imbalance, you do it. That's also part of the calling, just as any prophetic figure.
Yeah, it's really interesting that this brings us back to that discussion that we had, that we've been having about ethics and norms, and for me, it's just been an ongoing question, how we come to knowledge of norms, or if norms can be grounded in metaphysics. And I like the idea about
some norms can, but a lot of the norms are socially constructed, as we quickly discover, without even having to go through any kind of weight theory, just by basic, process of deduction. You can come to that same conclusion. But as a Gnostic, you go even further into that. So then now you're looking at not only the deductive truth that the mind discovers, or empirical, observation, but you're at a higher vantage point that you're seeing the whole causality of the imbalance.
But it seems like, but it seems that here it's if there's some kind of norm, it does have to do with creating a harmony out of discord.
Yeah,
that seems to be the emphasis here.
Yeah, to reset an imbalance, basically. Yeah. And it's not even important whether you achieve that balance. The attempt itself is what counts. That's part of that's a very important part of the process. Where this ends, ultimately is up to the unseen. But you, as the Theosophianic sage, are basically occupying the footsteps of the Prophet. So you have to address it, even if they cut you down. Even if nothing, transpires to really reset the balance, or something else comes and replaces it, like it did with the Ummah of Islam. For 23 years, the Prophet makes the call to these pagans. In the end, he subdues them, and that Jahiliyyah period ends. Islam is triumphant, but the minute he closes his eyes, even though a lot of these people have adopted Islam formally, yet they kind of relapse into the behaviors of the Jahiliyyah towards the Ahlul Bayt, as far as we are concerned. Whether it was with the election of Abu Bakr, or whether, the events that surrounded that election, in the way that Fatima and Ali alayhi salam were treated, and then subsequently with this whole household, and then the empires that crop up, and the Umayyads were basically, during the period of the Jahiliyyah, the worst enemies of the Prophet. The sons of Abu Sufyan take over the Ummah.
I'm thinking about what what is it that what exactly is it that directs one towards or impels one towards creating this kind of balance or restoring this kind of balance when one finds an imbalance. And
because that balance is a divine reality. The balance itself is divine.
Yeah.
And even if the material world resists that, it's still to even attempt to balance an imbalance is itself a divine act. Even if you don't achieve anything, the attempt itself is important.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that because the mention of the Muhammadan reality as the manifestation of the all-comprehensive name has something to do with it, that comprehension of everything, that fitting of everything together into a whole is itself that manifestation of the divine. Yeah, okay, great. I just wanted to mention that I'm getting a sense of there's a musical metaphor that's coming through this too, at least for me. I mean, we keep seeing it in the avaz, the concept of the avazi, and it occurs to me that there's a kind of musical connotation here also, with the discord of the names, but then the perfect man coming to create some kind of order and harmony, composition out of it. Yep. Okay.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Hussein. I was just thinking, as you were speaking, I was thinking, for some reason, it just popped into my head, the idea of a musical instrument and how, in order to, to play music through it that sounds good, the first thing you need to do is tune the instrument. And it's not in tune already automatically. You have to tune it up. And then there are certain rules that you have to follow in order to produce the music from it. So I know that's not what you were just saying necessarily, but it's funny that your mind went to a musical analogy there. At the same time mine did. Only I'm thinking, like, in terms of the norms and ethical rules and whatnot, that's kind of like the conditions for setting up the balance that becomes the music that is produced. I don't know if that made any sense.
Perfect sense.
And I just wanted to say also about Riaz, I think on page 231, he read, I don't know if he read this particular paragraph, but the last sentence is apropos here. So going back to page 231, this station is also by divine designation and not acquired. In fact, all stations are divinely designated, arising from the permanent archetype of the holiest emanation.
Yeah.
Now, it's this next sentence. Their manifestation is gradual after having acquired the means and conditions, although those who are veiled suppose they are acquired through exertion. In reality, this is not the case.
Mhm.
So I wanted to read that out loud because it touches on what we were talking about here. It's not as though our effort really actually achieves or attains anything. It's kind of happens when the conditions are right. And so that's where our effort needs to be, is to somehow satisfy those conditions, whatever they may be. Now, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. That's that. Can't hear you. It says your microphone is on, but we can't hear. Nope, can't hear anything. Is anybody else hearing Hassan?
How is
Yeah,
now?
now it's cool.
Okay, okay, okay. So, Uh, what Hussein mentioned, I want to continue from there. That because every single of the name seeks its manifestation, but this creates kind of conflict between them. So there should be a judge between them, and this judge will operate in such a manner that every one of the names will receive its due portion of manifestation and completing its perfection. But the interesting thing here, so as I was also expecting that the judge between them would be the supreme name or the all-encompassing name. But the judge mentioned it is the name Adl and
Yes.
Adala.
Yeah.
The just that is what strikes my
Which,
the,
according to the
that
Shiites, which according to Ali, per the transmission of the six names, is one of the names of the essence itself, right? So yes, the just or justice, the balance, which here adl is synonymous with mizan, with balance, is a divine, one of the highest divine attributes. Okay, so this is a very key understanding of this. Yeah.
because prophets, all of them, and Hakika Muhammadiyya in particular, they are a manifestation of all the different names of God. What makes prophet a prophet is exactly this name, Adil, because he is the one who plays the role of balance between the different opposing forces and persons and everything else in the society, which completes it. That was one thing. Also, what you are saying that as a result, consequence of this, for a prophet to be a prophet, or even as we are commenting here, to Gnostic or Wali to be a Wali, he should take on this role to play this judge or to be balance for his society. That it is seems like a point of consensus between all the divine thinkers. Would it be a Plato or Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, or Suhrawardi or Sheikh Muhyiddin? For example, if we take the metaphor of Plato, after one goes outside of the cave and he have enlightenment and so on, then the perfect philosopher goes back inside the cave to try to take out all the people who are in chains there. And also it goes with the analogy with Mi'raj, that after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi had his journey to the heavens, then the other part, he is going back to the earthly world to bring all that light and guidance he had received. And if the second part is not done, that the function of Wali or the Prophet Nabi, it is not complete, which is in contradiction with the simplistic understanding of Zuhd, that just go outside in the jungle or the mountain and don't care about this accursed material world.
Because in essence, there's also a selfishness attached to that, an incompletion in the understanding of a universal reality to the realization that you've had. If you're, just going to lock yourself up from the world. That engagement is, you take it from another sense. If we say that the saints and the prophets are imbued with barakah, blessings, right? Then one who sits in a cave and doesn't have any interaction with humans or anything else is withholding that barakah. And the point of a barakah is to be spread out because its origin is with God. That is the source. God is not stingy. Right? It's the human subject that is stingy, but God is not stingy. So if you remain in that station and you have shut yourself from the world, you're veiled of that particular reality.
Okay, just one or two more notes here. That the next thing. I'll just read the paragraph. It is in page 227, somewhere in the middle. I'll read just the sentences which are related to my question. Since each manifestation sought this supreme station by striving for ascendancy over the objects of its type, prophethood was coupled with the displaying of miracles and supernatural phenomena as a challenge to distinguish a true prophet from a false one. Basically saying everyone wants to be at the top of others, to be the ruler, the commander, and leader, and everyone else to be his followers. So, to distinguish the true leader or the true commander or the divine judge, let's put it in such words, there should be a criteria, and here the criteria are the miracles. It is because the miracle is what distinguish between the true prophetic figure and from the impostor. And I would say that this is valid for every age and every situation, but just our understanding of miracle should be deeper and more refined. That here in the miracle is not necessary to be material or physical miracle. Just looking at the person, you will find the how to say it, the science, he is the one. It may be traces in his character that he is a truthful person, he is sincere person, that he's enlightened person, and so on. And by this science you will be able to recognize him as a divine figure. Can you expound a little bit more on this point? I don't know if my question is clear.
It's
So,
not.
so the
Yeah. What is the question? Yeah.
uh, 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 so uh, the same manner that the prophets were recognized by their people by doing the miracles, what would be this thing which will be in the place of the miracle by which we will recognize the divine figures in our life?
Right. Okay. That's a
Which is not necessary to be material or physical miracle. It
no,
could
no,
be
no, no.
anything else.
No, it is, well, first of all, the criteria above all would be truth. Sidq is a very important one. The term that are translated here translates as possessors of resolve. I think it's a good way to translate the ulu al-azm, right? This means, this has other denotations as well, but the way I like this way that he is translated, because a prophetic figure has resolve. They don't back down. Okay? And this goes also for the awliya as well. If they are pushed by their enemies, they stand their ground. They know when to move back, right? But fundamentally, on the core message, they don't back down. Their integrity is very, very important. It's not even what they're saying, does what they say accord with how they behave? Now, you can also use this for many philosophers. There are a lot of people philosophizing and, reaching sublime levels, but what does their personal life show? Now, we can divorce the sublimity of the thought from the person, because it's not important who the person is. But if a given person is making a claim to either be a philosopher or a prophet or a saint or whatever, then that is valid. We need to look at that. Does that personal life of that person accord with the sublimity of their thought? Because they're asking to be followed, right? If they are not asking to be followed, then other criteria apply, and we just, look at the words and give credit where credit was due. But if they are coming with a mission to create a community, an ummah, right? Then these criteria do apply. You have to look at them extremely closely. And I think the last 50, 60 years, with the experiences that we've had with these assortments of various cults and claimants and whatnot, I think the issue now is even more pressing than before. That you need to look at the character of the person that is making these sorts of claims. Who are they? And what does their personal life reveal? Another criteria is that what is the reception of the message that they are putting out there? Is there even if certain people accept it, is there a reaction to what they're saying? Because this is a gauge. A negative reaction to a certain message, right, gives you the gauge to assess the veracity of that message. Why? Because a given society functions by certain hand-me-down consensuses or norms, and they don't want this upset. And if someone comes, such as Muhammad, and upsets that, right, then this tells you this gives you information about the resolve of the person saying it. So what is the question then becomes, what is the equivalent to this figure, to what Muhammad said to the Quraysh in La ilaha illallah, which was just completely revolutionary from multiple vectors and multiple angles? What is the equivalent of it? Once that is established, then other things start to fall into place about what this person is, if what they're claiming accords with the reality of the situation. This begins to give you information more and more and more and more and more and more. The miracles are neither here nor there. I mean, even a lot of stuff that even Arabi says, he talks about a lot of miracles, but he's very adamant in many places that a miracle is not the gauge of assessing the veracity of a given saint or figure, because even the awliya shaitan can perform miracles. Okay? But the resolve is paramount. How they are shaking up, this consensus reality is another one. And then ultimately how deep the word that they are giving, what is its the depth of its sapience? What is the depth of its wisdom? Is it shallow or is it deep, where it can, a given word or a given insight or a verse, ayah, whatever, has many different facets and ramifications that inform other things. This is the logos, because this is the logos speaks in a very holographic way. So even if it says something that has a very surface meaning, the ramifications of what it is saying are deeper than what it's saying. And that is a way that you can then assess that what is being said is coming from somewhere else, that this person is truly inspired. That, in my opinion, is what then is the real meaning of being ummi. Because that thing is not coming from you, it's coming from a source higher than you, using you as the vehicle to communicate.
Thank you very much, Sidi. All of these things you said, they are, at least for me, they're crucial because they are the. Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any last thoughts from anybody? No? Okay. So we're done with this. We're done with Qaysari. And for next week, for this class, we will start on the chapter of Adam. It is not that long, but it's a very packed chapter. So I'm kind of thinking whether we will go through the whole thing in one sitting, or whether I will more than likely split it up into two. So in the Austin translation, this is only about 7 pages long, which is the kind of the size of one of the visionary narratives of Sohrawardi. But this first chapter of Adam is such a quintessentially important chapter of the fusus al-hikam. And there are so much details in this, just in one sentence alone. So I'm thinking whether I'll sit and read it, and then our session will go for the full hour and 45 minutes of discussion. More than likely, I think I'll read the whole chapter. So if you want to read the other translations, whether of Dagley or I can't remember the other guy's name, the Israeli guy, you're welcome to do that. If you have access to the Arabic, that might not be a bad idea to revisit reading that chapter again. I mean, for me, reading Ibn Arabi each time in any language gives something new every time. So go ahead and read that, and then we'll come back together next week. And obviously, for Sohrawardi, we will be doing Avicenna's recital of Hey Ibn Yaqzan, the living son of the watchful. And so let's leave it here for today. And then until next weekend, everybody be well. Yahak.